Welcome back to MVM. Today we're going to be taking a look at a brand new abstract game. This one is called QUIN. It's from Arch and Gravity, a two-player game that takes about 15 to 45 minutes.
Yeah, this game, if it looks like it's something built by an ancient or advanced alien civilization, you're kind of right. It's as if an advanced civilization took Stratego and chess and kind of made a much better version of those games for sure.
Now what you're seeing here is a prototype, and that's because some of these pieces may fall over. And why are they going to fall over? Well, they're standing on some very, very small pieces of plastic, and there are magnets underneath of them, meaning that each of these spots is magnetized to the board. And you have 99 different spots on the board where you're going to be moving these pieces around, trying to accomplish one goal and one goal only, kind of like chess. And that's to get your light in the center of the board or destroy the other person's light.
Yeah, now we will be here for maybe 3 hours if we're going to explain every single move. It would be like explaining chess times 10. But we are going to cover some of these pieces and what they do. Just keep in mind, the layers of strategy with this take things like chess and Stratego up by a factor of 100.
Now, speaking of the pieces, when you look at a game like chess, there are 16 pieces that will start on the board in a game of chess with 6 unique pieces. Well, in this game, 10 pieces will start on the board, and there are 8 unique pieces. So you're not going to start with all of your pieces. Some of them are going to sit over here in these 0G. So it's up to you as a player to decide, out of all these different pieces that you have, which ones do you want to start the game with? Now, there's only one rule here, and that's your artificial light, which is one of those 8 pieces, cannot start the game on the board.
The other really interesting thing, to add more to that, are you have these little clone pieces. These are faces that actually go on the front of these. These are all removable in the game. These clone pieces, you have an option at the beginning to take one of these 4 clone pieces and replace any one of the pieces you have. Of course, not your light, that has to be on there. But you can basically double up on some of the pieces that you'd normally only have one piece of, or just getting more of some of the pieces if that's your strategy.
And you're going to notice that these pieces are facing the player who is using them. So like Stratego, you're not going to be able to see what the other person has on their faces. And unlike chess, where you know where everything is, you can play this in multiple modes. So you can play this with them facing or not facing. It's up to you. In fact, there's 7 different game modes that you can play with. We're playing with the basic game mode. So let's actually talk about what you're attempting to do here. All right, as we already mentioned, you have a light. And light is represented by this particular piece. And you only have one of them. Your goal is to get this piece to the center of the board. This is called the first sight. If you do that, you're immediately going to win the game, or if you destroy the other person's light. Now, you're going to hide this light at the start of the game. In fact, you don't even have to start with your light on the board.
No, it's really interesting. You can keep that off the board because on your turn, you can do one of 2 things. You're going to be moving one of your pieces, potentially using a piece. And keep in mind, some of the pieces can move and be used and vice versa. But the light could be held off the side of the board because the other thing you could do is on your turn, just bring a new piece onto the board. These gateway spaces where all these pieces begin, if one of those is empty, on your turn, you can simply take any of the pieces in your 0G board and bring them out onto the board. Some of which have unique effects. The artificial light, you can actually bring multiple of those out in one turn. Now, all of this is happening, the moves and everything, with your other player not really knowing what piece is what. So, unlike chess and Stratego, you're going to really be puzzling out what your opponent is doing because they might make some crazy move that you think, wait a minute, how is that even legal?
Yeah.
But then you have to kind of figure out, oh, that must be this piece interacting with this piece because of what the piece's powers are. And that's what we're going to get into just a little bit in this description.
Before we do that, let's talk about one more thing here, and that's the board itself. Now, you're going to notice a number of different lines, a number of different sections on here. As David already alluded to, there are 5 gateways for each of the players. That's the outside 5 places where you can start your people. You also can start your pieces, not people, but your pieces also on these 5 areas. That's where each is going to start. Now, you also have lines that you're going to notice where you're going to be traveling. When you take your moves, you're going to be moving along these lines or around the rings in the same areas. Then you're going to have this area in the center. This is going to be 3 different spots, but only the first or the lights can move into this first sight area. In fact, if you start on these areas as any other piece, you're going to jump through that center area. These 2 pieces are called the iris. Now, anything in that iris area loses its ability. So it's basically a blocking area or an area to kind of stall the other player to be able to do that. Now, we've already placed our pieces. Let's talk about how to play the game. As David alluded to, you're either taking a piece, moving it, or maybe using its action, or bringing a new piece into one of these 5 gateways on the back side.
Yeah, so both of us are going to tackle 2 of the different pieces here in a second. One of the other things we want to talk about, in addition to movement though, is flashing and capturing. Jeremy alluded to this. When a piece is going to land on another space where a rival piece is, those pieces will flash. This means you're going to reveal those pieces and determine who wins. If a piece beats another piece, and we'll get into that because some pieces will beat others, there's definitely a hierarchy there, it's going to capture that piece and the piece is going to go onto your rival's board if you lose it. If it's a tie, or if there's no capturing involved, those pieces are generally going to switch positions. Now, when you switch positions like that, it's kind of interesting because you're not going to switch the immediate positions they're in. If Jeremy moved from across the board with a piece to capture or try to capture one of my pieces, and I actually tied him, we're going to reverse positions, but I'm going to put my piece in his starting position. Not right in front of me, but back across the board. So it could be a risk if he tried to do that. And it's just as viable to use it to do that as it is to capture a piece.
Yeah, and one of those type of pieces is called the shadow, and that's one of the few that can move a lot of spaces, 7. Each of these pieces that we're going to be talking about has an X number of spaces that it may move to. First one is light. We have to understand light before we understand anything else. And as I said, you have 1 light and 1 light only to both win the game and to protect throughout the entire game. I'm starting my light right here, which David doesn't know, and my goal is to get it all the way to that center point. Light can move 2 spaces. And again, if you start on a line, you can move 2 spaces forward or 2 spaces along a ring. One thing we didn't mention is that the horizon can never be moved to. Now, there are some special pieces that can break that rule throughout the game. The other thing to notice is you're going to notice my guy here is blocked by another one of my unknown pieces to David. You can never move through a piece. So you're going to have to free up some of your back things unless you have some kind of special power with those particular objects within the game. Now, light can capture all, and that's mentioned right here on this QUIN key. It says that it can capture all types. So anything that this lands on is going to be able to destroy that. However, when you're moving these 2 pieces, people might know because there's only a few pieces in the game that move 2. So all this is a deduction element. You're trying to figure out, okay, what did he move there? Why did he move that 2 spaces? Maybe he moved a shadow, but he only moved it 2 spaces instead of 7. So you're constantly thinking about that throughout the game.
Yeah, one of the things you want to try to do, like Jeremy just mentioned, is maybe protect some of that information. You don't want to give away too much of that. On the flip side, you could basically rush the game and move forward to that center space with your scouts, maybe some other pieces, and really sort of overwhelm the other player because it kind of puts them on the defensive of like, what is going on?
Right.
There's a lot of things happening in the center of the board.
Right.
Another one of the pieces is time. Now, time only moves 1 space, and it's going to capture any other piece except for voids. But time is going to do one important thing. It's going to push your opponent back. So when you use time for its power, you're going to take your rival's piece or any one of their pieces and move it straight back up to 3 spaces on one of the sight lines. This effectively allows you to maybe stave off a checkmate, if you will. If you think that your rival is moving their light up into striking distance, you could basically push that back and then, in addition to that, take your turn.
Yeah, and he just mentioned that that can destroy everything but voids. Now, this is we're going to see a lot throughout the game. Some things will kill certain pieces or flash certain pieces, some will not. Void is one of those, and void can be very, very powerful. Void looks like this, and you can actually start with 4 of these pieces in the game because that's what you will have in your supply. Void, again, only moves 1 space, very much like time, so people may know that you're moving your voids around. Now, void has a special power. It's either going to move 1 space or activate all the other voids in the game. So this is what it does. If I am on this location, because it was there from a previous turn, I can find all the voids that I want to and put them around that piece, including anything on the horizon. So David knows that I have a void right here, creating all kind of havoc because I activated this and placed one on each point that accesses that either on a ring or on a straight line. And these can be very, very powerful.
Yeah, now, and again, keep in mind, he doesn't have to move all of those voids. He could move just one of those pieces. And if he's in the right position, I might mistake that for another piece, say like a reflector or something like that. But the idea with the void is it kind of ends up feeling like a bit of an amoeba. It turns into this big cluster that kind of slowly can move across the board and be another way that you can get across that horizon line.
That's right.
The next piece I want to talk about, there's only 2 of. You can start with one of them or both of them, and I'd recommend starting with both, and that's the shadow. Jeremy mentioned this a second ago. The shadow is going to capture everything that it flashes with except for time and the voids. So this is effectively kind of like the scout in Stratego, if you will, because this can move up to 7 spaces, which is a great distance across this board. If you started a shadow here, you're going to move all the way up into the iris and potentially beyond on the next turn. Now, if you do that, obviously people are going to know that's your shadow. But this is the thing that you're going to move up there and try to attack as much as possible, because again, unless someone's placed their void and time up there, which is going to take some time, if you will, because those move so slowly, you're able to use the shadows to go out and destroy or capture a lot of other pieces.
Yeah, and those are just 4 of the 8 different pieces that you're going to use in the game. Remember, at the start of this game, out of those 16 pieces that you start with, it's completely up to you on how you wish to start your particular game. You're always going to start with 10 pieces. None of those can be artificial light, and you don't have to start with your real light at the beginning of the game either. So every game that you play is going to be completely different, and how you manipulate these pieces is going to determine how well you do in the game.
Yeah, and I want to leave you with this. If you're thinking to yourself, okay, this sounds like maybe a deluxe version of Stratego, it is so much more than that. There are some significantly layered things that can happen here, and I just want to give you one example, because a lot of these pieces will end their turn when you use their power, and some of them won't. So you can really string a lot of things together. For example, if I see Jeremy moving a piece up the board and I think maybe he's making a move with his light to try to win the game, but he hasn't progressed too far. I've also noticed he's left one of his gateways open. I could potentially, in one single turn, use my totem. The totem's something we haven't talked about at all. And you're probably wondering, why is Aang from The Last Airbender on the table? Well, each player can bring a personal totem to the board, and they're going to use this once during the game. When you use it, you're going to turn it away from the board and resurrect one of the pieces that have been taken by your rival. So say, for instance, I've resurrected one of my shadows on the gateway over here. He's been moving up his light, and then I'm able to use time to move his light backwards within striking distance of my shadow or some other piece I may have resurrected. Then, since using time doesn't end my turn, I'm able to then move that piece and potentially capture his light. That's something that you really just don't see in these types of games, and something that didn't really occur to us until after we've played it a few times.
And finally, there are 7 game modes, which we already mentioned, which are going to be included in this strategy guide. This is an 80+ page strategy guide that's going to walk you through all kinds of different maneuvers, how to use specific pieces at specific times. So if you have any questions about the game, please go to their Kickstarter page to see all the final components, or leave comments below, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye. Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.